back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy, and we believe in empowering people through storytelling and education. And I'm so glad that you're here for today's episode. I'm super excited about it. I have Dr. Traci Baxley on, and she's awesome. We have such a great conversation, and she just wrote a book called Social Justice Parenting: How to Raise Compassionate, Anti-Racist, Just-Minded Kids in an Unjust World. And I just love her heart and the her inspiration behind it, and just her approach to everything, and just the ability to let me ask her hard questions. And I think you guys are really going to love this interview. It's going to be great for all of us to learn and grow together, to learn to be parents who raise kids, who advocate for each other, who stick up for each other, and love. I feel like one of my biggest fears is that I'm going to end up having a bully child, and I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do? But that's why the conversations just really start in the home, and we talk about that. If you missed the last couple weeks, a couple weeks ago, we had on the ladies from Bread and Olive Co. And I love having people like them on because I love supporting businesses that are changing the world, changing the way that we look at things, that are empowering small communities and giving back. They're such an awesome company. So it was just so cool to be able to talk to them about their inspiration behind it and how they really are making a difference, not only in the communities, but using their profits to even give back, and then to empower the communities in Peru. And then last week we had on Dr. Rummel, and she is awesome. She's a natural pediatrician, and she just gave me so many good tips on there. And make sure that you go and join her membership, her Parent the Doctor Mom membership, which I just did. And I'm super excited to start transforming my medicine cabinet, making sure that I have everything on hand to help Jovi if she gets, not if, when, right? When she gets sick, because all kids get sick at some point. And just to be confident, feel confident in caring for her. So the podcast episode was really great. I really enjoyed talking with her. And then, like I said, we have Dr. Traci Baxley on today. And I just got done today recording a couple other interviews with just amazing women that I cannot wait for you all to hear from. I've really been loving doing these interviews lately. And I guess part of it's selfish because I'm just like, I have so many questions that I get to ask and learn. And I'm like, oh, I really want to talk to this person. And I just really hope that you guys get something out of it too. Make sure that you reach out to me. Let me know who you want to have on, what topics you want to have on. We always try to make all of that happen because I want to make sure that this is a podcast for all of us just to learn and grow together. All right, we are going to dive into the interview. All right, everyone. I'm super excited about today's episode. I have Dr. Traci Baxley on, and we are going to talk about social justice parenting. She has a book that's coming out next month, and it's about how to raise compassionate, anti-racist, justice-minded kids in an unjust world. And I feel like this podcast is just coming at the right time. There's so much going on in the world, and it's hard to know how to have conversations with our kids and how to not just raise good human beings, but raise people who want to contribute to the world and actually make it a better place and to stick up for people and to do the right thing. So I'm super excited to have this conversation. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. I see that you have 5 children, which is like my husband's dream. He's like, I want 5 kids. I'm like, we'll see. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this work.
Yeah. So I am, like you said, a mother of 5 children, and I am a consultant and coach around belonging and diversity issues. I also met a professor at the local university here in South Florida, where I teach in the College of Education, and I teach multicultural education and curriculum courses for teachers or future teachers. So I think this is just kind of the natural progression of my work. It's always been about belonging, even as in the early stages of my career when I was an elementary school teacher before I had children of my own. I always gravitated toward those kids who seemed to kind of have a hard time fitting in for whatever reasons. And I just think, I don't know if it's me being an empath, or I'm not sure what that calling is on my life, but it is that. And so it just has progressively gotten to where I'm using that same love and passion to support families in this work.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I love, I was reading about just kind of what social parenting is and what it addresses. And I love a lot of the things that I'm seeing on here because as I was kind of telling you, like before we started recording, my parents always taught me to love people and to accept people, be kind to people, don't judge them, just don't make snap judgments or whatever. But that's kind of like how far the podcast went, or not the podcast, the conversation went. And, and now we have a 1-year-old and we're like, how do we raise not only a good human being, but somebody who wants to do the right thing, who sees something happening and isn't afraid to stand up or isn't afraid to be like, hey, like, we don't talk like that, or that's not cool to speak like that or to say these things and to even bring another perspective to friends or conversations. But I feel like a lot of parents don't know what to do. So it's just, we're not going to talk about it. Right. So you opt out of that conversation of race and diversity. But I'm just like looking at the social justice parenting stuff and it's like, we shouldn't be doing that. Right. Like you need to have that conversation. Yes. So I'd love for you to touch on that.
Yeah, I think you really, as parents, we have to channel that fear of having those conversations into a way that's very constructive for our children and a way that we can begin to model those behaviors that we want them to have. Like you were saying, that you want your child to be that child that speaks up, stands up, but they're not necessarily going to do that on their own. So what we do and the way we parent and the way that we show up for them is going to be kind of the model for who we want them to become when they grow up. And I think a lot of fear around, what a lot of parents like, previous generations did, they taught us to be loving. They taught us to not see color. But I think in doing that, we also shut down the conversations around race in our country. And because it's such a major part of our history, in terms of policies and practices and the way we treat each other and the way laws and systems are created, that when we don't talk about it in our homes, we then raise children just to see race as a taboo topic too. And so in order to be able to undo some of that learning that we've had as young people, we really have to kind of reflect on what we did learn as children and be more intentional about the way that we're going to show up for our own children. And that starts with reflection and having some open dialogue around what race means to us as a family. Like, what are our core values? What are important for us? What is the legacy that we want to leave to our children when they go out into the world? And you can't get to that place unless you really kind of start to identifying what those things are for you and your family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I also see like how it talks about like using events in the world to have these conversations. And we all know like the last couple of years, there's been a lot of events in the world. And I do feel like it's hard because I feel like there's so much, like you said, unlearning to do. And I've had to recognize like a lot even within myself. Like I've never seen myself as like a racist person. I've traveled all over the world. I've lived in other countries. I love culture, but I feel like where the privilege came in for me was kind of the mindset of, I didn't grow up with a lot. Like we didn't grow up with a lot. I've had a job since I was 16. I've paid for everything I had. I couldn't afford to go to college. But still, because I'm a white person, I still had more opportunities and privileges. When it came to work, I lived and worked in Vegas, and just certain things like that, that I didn't really recognize or understand until everything happening the last couple of years. But where I've really seen it is I'm a birth worker. So being a birth doula, I've always known the statistics, But I feel like that's where it's like, okay, then you need to do something about it. Like I've just realized the last couple of years, okay, then we need to be supporting Black birth workers because that's what's needed to change the numbers, right? Like you can't just know it and be like, this needs to stop. It's like, okay, where do you take action? And I feel like that's how I can show my daughter is like, hey, we're supporting this because this is what's going to happen. Like these people up here aren't really saying anything about it. Mm-hmm. So we have to start here, like in our community, and we need to support these efforts to make sure that these people are heard. The people that are being treated differently. We have a big refugee communities here as well. So I feel like it was upsetting to me that it took the last year and a half for me to actually take action.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm hearing all the pieces that you just said, and I think a lot of that wraps around this idea of privilege, right? Which we have been so afraid of lately. It's been used in ways that people don't want to talk about it, or they feel like they have to be defensive about it. And like even you saying that you feel badly about the last year and a half, it's taken you that long to kind of put those pieces together. And I think it's really important for us to let go of any guilt, that we're feeling about different privileges that we hold in our lives, and really, the Maya Angelou quote, when we know better, we do better, and move forward. And I also think that knowing that we have various identities in our lives, right? I'm a woman, I'm Black, I'm a mother, I am upper middle class socioeconomically, I'm a Christian. Like all of these different identities all have places of privilege and places of marginalization. And I think when we live in a country where certain areas are marginalized and certain areas or certain identities are privileged, that we need to just look at them not as this terrible thing, but as a way that, okay, that means I have some power in this identity in our country right now. And then how do I use that identity in ways that supports people who may not? So we need to not get wrapped around feeling guilty, feeling bad, feeling defensive, but really like, how do we use it for tools for change? How do we start to be more aware when we have privilege in these different identities, and then support those people who don't have it, which it sounds like is what you're saying you're starting to do now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's wonderful, but I don't want you to use your energy on feeling badly about what was, because it was. Mm-hmm. And now like you said, we all have to kind of rethink the way we grew up, rethink the things that we used to do, and relearn and teach our children the things that we are learning as we grow and learn.
Mm-hmm. I want to share with you something that has been revolutionizing my wardrobe, and that is Fix Freestyle. I've talked on here before about the struggles of me finding things that are cute. A lot of my clothes are very old and janky, and I'm trying to replace them with some staple items, and I just want to be able to walk into my closet and put on anything, throw anything together and feel cute and okay. Like now it's like half the things I walk in there, I'm like, I can't wear this because I'm just going to feel frumpy in it. And it's like, why do I even have this? Which is why I love Fix Freestyle. It's your trusted style destination where you can discover and instantly buy curated items based on your style, likes, and lifestyle. And the thing that I like is that you can change your status in there to pregnant, which is what I did with my last pregnancy. So I got items for my pregnancy that I could wear that I felt really cute in. So just because you're pregnant or you have a baby, you don't necessarily have to pause or stop it. You can just change your status on there to pregnant and find things for you. You can get started today by filling out your style quiz at stitchfix.com/mamas. That's stitchfix.com/mamas to try Stitch Fix Freestyle, stitchfix.com/mamas. So you'd mentioned that you're a Christian, and I grew up in the Christian faith too. So I feel like that also was like when my parents would tell me, like, they would say like, love people as Jesus loves people. and he created everyone equal, right? But that's like as far as the conversation went. So I'd love for you to maybe touch on, like, as like a family of faith, how to take that conversation a step further.
Yeah, I just, when I talk to my kids about our faith, it is from not kind of the man-made doctrines of Christianity. I am a very progressive Christian in the sense that my social values may not align with what other Christians may feel is that they hold true. But I always tell my kids, the whole "what would Jesus do" mantra is so true, because where he dwelled was always with the people who were marginalized, right? He was about action taking. He was about social justice. He was about helping those people who needed help in ways that he had the power, he had the privilege, he had the means to do so. And so that is how I want my children to live their lives, in a way that when you have, you do. We talk about these hard conversations. We don't walk around them. We don't ignore them, because they exist in the world, and we have to exist in the world. And I want my children to, I say this thing about creating belonging in your homes, so that we are teaching our kids to be the ones to create belonging in the world. Mm-hmm. And to me, that aligns with my faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. My husband and I heard about this book called Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God. And I feel like that book aligned so much with what we believe, because we've visited different churches, and sometimes it's just like hard finding. I feel like you're never going to find something that you completely agree everything with, because we all have our own experiences and things, but just even a little bit beyond that. But the book was really cool because it brought everything back to how Jesus lived. It's like some Christians say this, some Christians say that, some preach this, some preach that, but literally, like, look at Jesus's life. That's like what it comes down to. Like, yes. What would he do? Like, how did he treat people? How did he live? How did he act? He acted in love, and he accepted people, but stood up for people, and everything that you're saying. So I love that, because there's a lot going on in the world with religion and stuff too. So
yes,
it is sometimes hard to find where you fit in, because I feel like with everything going on, it's like taking sides, right? And it's like, yes. Yeah, I am a person of faith, but I don't agree with what this large group of people who are representing Christianity or whatever is saying. So it can be difficult, but I feel like when you stick by that, it's like, how do you argue with that, right? Like,
no, I totally agree. I totally agree with what you're saying, 100%. And I feel that same way too. And raising children who have faith, but hopping around the churches to find a space where I feel like it aligns with my core values has been difficult for me too, as a Christian. And I think when I look at social justice parenting, the development of that, really the foundation or the underbelly of that is this idea of radical love, right? Which is, Jesus was the example of that radical love, right? It's that unconditional love, showing up for others, even when it's hard, expecting nothing in return, focusing on the feelings and the perspectives of others, seeing humanity in each of us, a love that's fueled by compassion and understanding. It promotes growth and health, and it's expansive. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of love that I want my children to have. And it is the foundation of what this whole idea of parenting, using social justice parenting as the foundation for you as a family or as a parent.
Mm-hmm. One other concept that I love that social parenting addresses, because again, it's something that my husband and I have talked a lot about. We're like kind of this cloud that a lot of parents are raising their kids in, and basically paving the way for them in everything so they never have to experience discomfort. Like even going to school and being like, I heard this thing happen, and it's like, if you're making sure that everything is fair for your child, if you're making sure that their feelings are never hurt, they're not going to know how to function like in this real world, because life is not fair. Like life just is not fair. And so I love that it talks about getting honest about wanting what's best for my child versus for all children. Because it's not just about your kids. And when you raise them that way, they're going to have that mentality. What's best for me, not what's best for the world, what's best for us collectively.
Yeah. And I think ultimately that's that fear-based parenting, right? The need to control, the need to protect. It's good intentions, but it really does rob our children of so much things in their lives. It robs them of problem solving, experiencing their curiosity, right? It robs them of opportunities that they can have where they can grow and learn. And so I think when we're doing all the things and we're protecting in the long run, we're just really projecting our anxiety and our stresses directly onto our kids. And that it damages them in the long run, really. And I think, the way we parent in our homes, it's not just private. It's something that's going to show up in the real world. And when our kids haven't had experiencing hard times or different people or things that they have to figure out, that's going to show up in the world. And it's going to be hard for them, and it may be difficult for the people around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. And my husband, he always says, like, because right now our daughter's like the youngest of the cousin group. And so, and he's like, babe, you have to let her get picked on, like you have to let these things happen. Like they're going to figure it out. Or, when she goes to school and somebody's picking on her, like not driving. And like, there's that mom in me that wants to drive there and be like, and it's like, no, you need to teach her how to stick up for herself, how to problem solve, and not have you constantly step in every single way, because you have adults who still don't know how to make like a doctor's appointment for themselves, or what do I do if I need car insurance? Like there's like, they're like, I don't know how to do
I call that the mama bear syndrome, right? We do.
Yeah.
We want to go in hard for our kids.
I don't want to see my daughter hurt. I'm like, you want to hurt my daughter? I will hurt you. Like, and then it's like, I survived things in my life, and I feel like we all have those moments. Like I can remember pinpoint moments where somebody said something very hurtful to me. Like I remember when I was maybe 10, 11, and I was getting made fun of on the playground for having a unibrow. And I remember that moment. And I went home and my sister shaved my unibrow for me right down the middle, creating the next 10 years of eyebrow problems for myself. But I mean, I remember being told that and up until that point, I had no awareness of it. I didn't know I had a unibrow, and you kind of have these moments in your life where you remember it, but you have to learn, my mom didn't go yell at those kids.
Yeah. We have to teach our kid advocacy skills, right? How do you self-advocate? And a great way of doing that is really role-playing at home. If somebody says this, what do we do? What are 5 things that we can do that are constructive in how we respond? What strategies can we put in place in advance so that when these things happen, our kids they don't have to think, they already have a response. So it's more about less protecting and more preparing.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. That's part of like giving them the tools to do it themselves.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about how to talk about the unconscious bias in your home, and teaching your kids that, because I feel like no matter how hard we try, like we're going to have that as parents.
Yeah, I think it's all about creating safe spaces to have difficult conversations in your home, right? Because when our children can start to trust us in listening, and not just fixing, because, we want to go right into fix mode, but really just actively listening to our children and creating spaces where they can come to us with hard conversations, and us, even when we're struggling to answer those conversations, it helps them to unpack things like unconscious bias, or talking about race, or talking about some of the things that are going on in the world. And I think the more that we're having those conversations, the more our children feel safe coming to us to ask the questions, because let's face it, there are going to be topics that come up that we don't know the answers to. And our children need to know that we don't know the answers, and that they can be a part of us finding out as a family. Because we want them to know where we start, where we stand as a family on these tough conversations. And I think the more we talk about those at home, the more when they go out into the world, they will know the core values of my home. And these are things that we believe, even when the outside world is saying something different. Mm-hmm. So I think addressing those issues, talking about them, researching them together, having safe space for open dialogue is really important to start to unpack the things that we may not even know how to address at this moment. And I think when we begin to let go of some of those fears, and not waiting until we think we know the right thing to say, we start to teach our children to work through things, to know that not having the answer always is okay too. And then you're modeling constructive ways of problem solving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like as a kid, there was a lot of like, oh, you're too young for that. Or I feel like there was like a lot of topics that I was like scared to talk to my parents about. Especially like growing up in a super Christian home, it was just like a lot of taboo for certain conversations. Mostly surrounding like sexuality and things like that. Yes. And so I just want to make sure it's like, how do I create a home where my kids feel like they can talk to me about anything and come to me with anything. But also understanding that some actions have consequences. I feel like that's like where it's hard, because it's like, I want you to be able to tell me everything, but also, you know, that like when you make certain decisions, there's natural consequences of the world. And then there's also consequences of the home. Mm-hmm. These are the rules that we abide by and our core values. And I mean, everything is a different consequence. It's not like if you do something, it's automatically you're grounded for a month thing. But do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely. Okay. Yes. I think, again, establishing your core values as your home, right? These are the things that we believe in. And when what we do don't align with these things, there are consequences, right? How do we get ourselves back in alignment? What are our rules? Establishing what those rules are. You have a young child, right? So these are things that you and your husband do now. What are our core values? What do we want our children to walk away with from our home that is the most important thing to us? So you want to establish those. And as your daughter gets older, she becomes part of those conversations. What do you think our core values are? These are the ones we have now. Is there anything we need to change? Anything we need to adjust? And then you start bringing your children. In our house, we have, we used to do it weekly on Sundays, weekly family meetings. Now it's more monthly. But we also used to have like just popsicle sticks in a jar, and we pull out conversation starters, right? Some of them will be light and kind of funny. You know, what would you do if this happened? Some of them will be deeper, more hard conversations that we have dialogue around at the dinner table. So you should establish some practices in your home that make sense, that creates the openness. When my older kids are coming to me now to talk, I start off by saying, are you talking to me as your mom, or are you talking to me as a friend? Because then I know I need to either just listen, or I need to be coming up with some solutions, helping them come up with solutions as a mother. So I think establishing those practices early are really important. And then I think it's really important, which is really kind of one of the core building blocks of social justice parenting, is that reflection piece. How was I raised? what wonderful things happened in my home as a young kid that I want to give to my children? What things that didn't go as well, we didn't go as deeply, we didn't do enough of, that I want to be more intentional about bringing that into my home life. And then you need to do whatever that is to make sure it becomes part of the practice. So I think some things that you're saying to me resonates with me, because I grew up in a Christian house. My dad was a preacher. But my mom was always my safe space. Like, she was, I think the way my Christianity is aligned with the way I was raised, the way my mom saw the world. And so I want my children to have that too. So I am very intentional about saying that we believe in Jesus, right? But we also believe in these social issues are very important to us. And so I think establishing those early on, before your children even know that it's a thing, is really important. But it starts with you and your partner getting clear about what those things are too, so that you're on the same page. Mm-hmm. And I believe in like creating something quick and easy and fun, or something that our kids can remember what those are. Like, for instance, one of our core values is you are your brother or your sister's keeper. Like, families first. No matter what happens, you're your sister's keeper, you're your brother's keeper. So when they're not in alignment with that, they can call each other on it, because it's our core value. Mm-hmm. Or if another one is own your own junk. So you can't tell me the things that are going wrong from that somebody did to you. You first have to see what your role was in that. Like, how do I do some self-reflecting? How do I see it from somebody else's perspective before I go and tattletale, right? And so they can call me on it too. Like, Mom, are you owning your own junk? And I go, okay, let me see. Am I in alignment with what I say? Yeah. I want you to be. So we have to be clear about that too, as parents, that we're giving our kids respectfully, but we're giving them room to say, that's not in alignment with who we are and what we believe. And this idea of doing for others, or stepping out into the world, raising kids who are more compassionate and kind and who are socially involved, if that's important to you, it needs to be a part of your core values, so that when things happen, we can easily say, this is who we are as a family, mm-hmm. or wait a minute, this is not who we are. How do we then get back in alignment to where we are doing the things that we say are the most important things to us?
Mm-hmm. That's so good. I love that idea of just setting up those core values now. And it doesn't matter like where you're at in your parenting journey. If you're like hoping to be parents one day, or if you already have like grown kids, whatever it is, like yes. setting up those core values. My husband's going to love that you are your brother's keeper, because he grew up with like, I mean, his siblings and then like all of his cousins, like all in the same town, always together, always whatever. And he's like, you have your family's back, you stand up for each other, you protect each other. And he was like, the reason I didn't get in trouble as a kid is because there was always eyes on me. Like, there was always a cousin, like at a party, there was always like somebody at a party being like, are you going to make the right decision or not?
Yeah. Are you in alignment with our values here?
Right. Like, I know where you live. So he was like, to him, like, we would love to move like to the mountains somewhere, and just kind of get away from the chaos. But then we always talk about like, how do people raise their kids without family around? And it's so hard. I have a lot of friends who do that. And it's like, it is good to have, like, we're so blessed that we have a lot of family around, that our daughter will know that she has people who can stand up for her, in any situation. Yeah. She has a bunch of big boy cousins. So we're like, you better protect her. You better watch out for her.
And some people have to, sometimes you have to make your family, right?
For sure.
You create this extended village that, and listen, that again, that's going back to social justice parenting. That's what social justice parenting is creating a global village, right? Mm-hmm. I want to make decisions in my house with my children that will ultimately impact your house, mm-hmm. right? So the kids that I raise in my home, who are they going to be in the world, and how does that impact your children? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important, right, that we're not we're just raising our own children, but the decisions that we make really are about everybody's children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. I would love for you to talk about how to do allyship right. How you're saying like our children affect other people's children. And I feel like that's like where a lot of parents, there's the disconnect. It's like, hey, don't be racist. We love everybody. But actually teaching your kid to be an ally is kind of a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I think this whole idea of anti-racism and allyship, I think we make it harder than it is, that we are all so afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing that we do nothing. And I stand firmly in this concept that doing nothing is the only wrong way to do it. And so when you are trying to build allyships, when you're trying to raise kids who are anti-racist, it is a journey. You're going to get it wrong. And listen, I'm learning too. We're all learning. I'm learning in my allyship for other groups of people. So we're all learning. We're all growing. We're all going to make the mistakes. Don't let the mistakes stop you from growing and learning. I mean, it's the same thing that you would say to your kids when they mess up in soccer. You tell them to keep going, right? The more you practice it, the easier it gets, the better you get. It's the same thing with allyship. If I could say key things in the allyship world is that you do more listening than talking, right? You don't center yourself. You don't compare your traumas or losses with theirs, because that is how you center yourself. You show up for the group in a way that you are supporting the way they need to be supported, not the way you think you should support, because support may look different for them. And do your research before you start supporting so that you have some idea of who it is you're supporting and ways that they may need support. Just, a simple thing like when we are collecting, say you're collecting canned goods, right, to give to a shelter. If they need diapers and you're bringing peas, it's great, but it's not what they need. Mm-hmm. So doing some research ahead of time is really helpful. But part of it is learning while you're there. How can I be of service in a way that really helps you and not centers me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like that goes back to being honest about what's best for my child versus what's best for all children. Because even in allyship, it's not about you. It's not like, oh, I'm helping this person so I can feel good. It's how do I give of myself? But like, I genuinely want to uplift this person.
Yeah, I'm sharing my privileged space in ways that's a tool for change.
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like that, again, I feel like I just go back to that, like what's best for my kid, because like you're saying, like even that mama bear syndrome, we want to protect our children and create that space. But I feel like a good way to show them, to start activism is even just like getting involved in your community or showing some type of volunteer work or whatever it is, that this is what we do as a family. We show up for people who have needs and we see what they need and we help.
And I think redefining what protection looks like. Protection isn't about creating a wall or a bubble around your kids. Protection is about how do I make the world better for when my children are out in the world. How do I make the world better for them in a space that goes beyond my household? Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about protecting, think about it long term, not immediate. How do I change the world? How do I make the world better so that when they are out in the world, they won't be having the same struggles as people are right now. They won't have the same hurts as deeply as we're having right now. So when we think about protection, if we can look at it from a different, like kind of spin it on its head a little bit and see it in a way that it's bigger than just what's going on in your house.
Mm-hmm. Right. And creating a bubble, you're not protecting them. You're doing that disservice because they're not going to have those tools If you want to protect your children, they need to have tools to meet different challenges. They need to know how to stick up for themselves, how to stick up for other people, how to show up in the world confidently. And they're not going to be able to do that if you're running around with a little, hovercraft over them.
Yes. And it's keeping your kids in the bubble is really it's keeping them from the truth, mm-hmm. right? They need to know what's going on in the world. Now, yes, everything needs to be age appropriate. Everything needs to be with contextualized, right? We need to tell them, we need to maybe help them to see it from a perspective that they understand or an example that they understand. It needs to be sensitive in how we tell them. We don't need to give them more details than they can handle or that they need. But we raised our children in my house that there's no conversations off limits. We talk about everything. One of the examples I put in the book was we had a neighbor's child over to our house, and we had a book like Beginner's Guide to Art. And, some of the sculptures had no clothes on. And she was just like, oh, my God, the neighbor's child, like looking at this art. And my husband came in the room when they were on the floor looking at the book. And the girl kind of jumped and was like a little bit nervous. And so when my husband saw what they were doing, he just kind of sat on the floor with them and then started talking about the art, what it was made of, why it was the way it was, and where it was in the world, so that it wasn't something that was uncomfortable, but it was just something kind of normal. And now let's learn more. So I think a lot of times, if we just give the children a little bit of what they need to answer those natural, curious questions, they begin to build the habits that they need to be able to problem solve on their own when they get older, and not be okay with status quo, but to ask more questions, to push back, to be able to change things when things don't seem right. Mm-hmm. But it starts with us really being open and honest with our children. And sometimes that honesty looks like, I don't know. It makes me sad too. I don't know the answers. But what can we do as a family to try to change those things? How can we learn more together? So having the answers isn't what I'm saying, but having the dialogue is what's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said kind of like having age-appropriate conversations. Could you give us some examples or ideas for what maybe kid-friendly activism could look like?
Yeah, I mean, some of these are called the portable projects. These are things because obviously we can't take our kids to certain places, right? I mean, just because of their age, they're not allowed to be in certain places or whatever. But the portable projects are projects that you can do in your own home and then take them somewhere. Like if there's a woman's shelter, right, that needs diapers or, feminine hygiene products, you can, in your home, pack those things up, invite a couple of families over, talk about why you're doing it and why these people need these things. And then your children can be a part of packing the boxes and then just taking them off. Same with anything that you can do in your own home. One of my girlfriends, her family started in our community. There are up to 7 of them now, but they, the lending libraries where you put books in and you can take books. Mm-hmm. They did that for a pantry, the lending pantry. And so people in the neighborhood put canned goods and non-perishable things in the pantry, and anybody who needs it can take it out. So it's like a constant rotating in and out. And kids all over, I see kids all over the community, going with their parents to put these things in the pantry. So they can be little things that build this idea of kindness and compassion in your family. Paying for somebody behind, like we do at Starbucks all the time, right? We'll pay for somebody behind us. And my kids used to get so excited turning around in the back of the van to look and see, the people's reaction. And so little things like that become natural parts of raising your children. And when they are older, it's just who they are. Mm-hmm. And they don't feel like it's something that they have to learn or do, but it just becomes innate because you've raised them doing those little things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so good. Sorry, my dog is... He heard my husband's voice, so he barked. Yeah, that's so good. I feel like that, a lot of that goes back to the leading by example. like the core values, like this is how we live. And your kids, if you just come up with a set of core values that you say, but you're not living it, then your kids aren't going to either. But if you're like, this is what we believe, this is how we live in our home, then you can all kind of call each other out on it, like you said. But it has to start with the parents. Like, this is how we're choosing to live our life. It has to show up every day.
Yep.
Right.
And another one of our core values is give joy, get joy. And so that's that idea of, even if it's just a smile, right? That's giving joy. And then the other flip side of that is allowing other people to give you joy, right? Because we know how good it feels to give. So that idea of being a vessel for somebody else's joy is really important too. If somebody's giving you a compliment, like don't blow it off. Or if somebody is asking you, can I help you? Don't say like I got it or I can do it. Because people are asking you because they want to give joy. And you should be a vessel to receive other people's joy and not really deprive them of that moment. Mm-hmm. So I think the little things matter and they add up over time.
Right. Yeah. We have so much pride when people are like, can he help you? And you're like, no, I got it.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, you know how much you like in helping other people. Let people help you.
Exactly.
And it's not a pride thing.
Yes. And that could have made that person's day, feeling like they helped in some way.
So before we wrap up, I'd just love for you just to tell us about your book coming out. I know we talked about a lot of things in here that you're going to talk about in your book, but tell us when it comes out, where people can find it, and just a little bit more about it and where they can connect with you at.
Yeah. So the book is Social Justice Parenting, How to Raise Compassionate, Anti-Racist, Justice-Minded Kids in an Unjust World. It's a mouthful, but it has chapters in the 5 building blocks of social justice parenting, which I call the rocks. There's a chapter on how to teach kids self-advocacy. There's an anti-racist chapter. I also have a appendix that has like 100 or more, I don't know how many, children's literature books on the different topics that I covered in the chapters that preceded. So that if you want to start off with children's literature, and it's all divided into age and grades and topics. So that's pretty cool because right away you can get started. And it is available everywhere right now, pre-ordered. And it comes out October 19th. Very excited about it. It's getting some decent reviews, which I'm very thankful for. And also on my IG, my Instagram account, we are doing a kind of a raffle for anybody who wants to use the book in their reading groups or book clubs. And I'm going to do like a guest appearance on them. So I'm excited about that. That's going to be fun. And we're really excited to start the journey with it being out in the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is your IG handle for people listening?
Social Justice Parenting.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Well,
and my website's the same, socialjusticeparenting.com.
Okay. I will include all of those links in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for answering the questions I had, for giving us some tips and tools of where to start with our families, and also for creating this book, because I know that, like I said, I mean, me and my husband are clueless. It's like, yeah, we want to raise our kids this way, but how do we start? Like there weren't in-depth conversations in our home. Like, how do we incorporate that into our parenting journey? So,
and I really tried to write the book so that it was simple and action-based. So that, if you're reading it, and I know we're all busy, but it's relatively a quick read, and then there's some actions you can do right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So everybody check out her book, and go to the links in the show notes. Make sure that you're following her. You can sign up for the raffle if you have a book club, and make sure that you're sharing the information that you learned. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for sharing your time and energy and expertise with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so grateful for my conversation with her. Make sure that you get her book. It just came out this last week on October 19th. Yeah, it just went on sale. So make sure that you grab her book and check it out. I know that I will be. If you're listening, make sure that you're subscribed, that you're staying up to date on all the podcasts, that you're staying in the loop, and that again, you reach out to me, let me know what you want to hear. All right. Love you guys. I will talk to you next month. Holla.
If you want to be the most interesting person at the cocktail party, well, hop on over and listen to the Brain Candy podcast.
Our award-winning content will have you laughing while you're learning.
We read all the best articles, books, and studies and keep up with new TV shows, documentaries, and pop culture. And then we cram it all into 2 shows a week.
Conspiracy theories, cannibal rabbits, unsolved mysteries, the history of the Walkman. There's something for everyone.
The Brain Candy podcast. Find our link in the show notes.
Or simply search for the Brain Candy podcast on your podcast app.